In the watch world, you have huge brands, big brands, independent brands, small brands, and even micro brands. But today's episode with Wes Kwok of Nodus Watches highlights some big moves. From starting with nothing to reinvesting in his company with his partner Cullen, only to begin producing parts for others, the journey has been no small task. Further, Wes and Nodus have led the charge for a new kind of watch show with Intersect, where the focus is to keep the crowds to a minimum while having a large, supportive community impact. This conversation even begins with Wes's recent big trip, which you'll hear about right now. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H podcast. How you doing, man?
Good. Tired, but that's from the jet lag. I was in Asia for a whole month, and I only got back like 4 days ago, so I'm still on Taiwan time right now.
So, were you in Taiwan the whole time?
Oh no. I was traveling around. So I started in Hong Kong, then I went up to the mainland for factory visits, and then after that I went to Chiang Mai, Thailand for a week, Taipei for a week, and then Philippines for about a week and a half.
Wow. So, only 1 week of that was business?
No, only 2 days of that was business.
Holy shit. So you were traveling for it's all but borderline sabbatical.
Yeah, you could call it that. I mean, I was still working from like the hotel, but I would have to jump on 2 a.m. calls once a week. But other than that, it was pretty chill.
So were you solo or
I was solo up until the Philippines. I went with Cullen for the factory trips, and then the reason I went to Thailand for a week is because my girlfriend couldn't leave that early, and I didn't want to come back to the U.S. just to go back to Asia with her to see her family. We were going to a wedding, one of her aunt's weddings.
Oh, cool. So she's Thai?
No, Filipino.
Oh, Filipino. Okay, got it. No, nice, man. I've only been to I guess Taiwan's the only one of those that I've been to so far. Um
To Taipei.
yeah. Yeah, I was just there in March actually. Um I'm dying to go to the Philippines. I really want to go to Vietnam, and I'd really like to go to Thailand as well. Obviously, it's beautiful beaches.
Yeah,
Um,
man, I loved the Philippines so much. Like I've been to a lot of the major cities in Asia, like all over China, Southeast Asia, but I think Manila takes the cake as my favorite major city in Asia.
what'd you love about it?
Man, I loved everything about it. I love the like it's weird, right? Growing up, so I lived in China for a bit too, right? So in China, there's a bank called ICBC, and it's like only in China you see it. And then in Singapore, where my family's from, there's a bank called UOB, and then here in the U.S. we have Chase. And I remember driving down. I was in a taxi on one of the main roads in Manila, and I looked out the window and I saw all three banks next to each other. So it was kind of like emblematic of the Philippines being, one of the few places, potentially the only place, at least the only place that I've seen the Western world and the Asian world kind of coexisting, but not in like a like they weren't fighting at all. It like was a very harmonious type of feeling there. And I actually asked some of Jian's family about it. I was like, how do you guys interpret or perceive Americans, and our politics, Trump and Biden and all that stuff? And then conversely, how do you perceive, Vladimir Putin? How do you perceive President Chairman Xi from China? And they were like neutral across the board on everything. Like they had like no opinion either way. They're like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of messed up, but we're like kind of like 50-50 on everything. They understand both sides.
Is that sort of just like a byproduct? By the way, was this like dinner conversation or like was this?
Yeah, it was dinner conversation.
That's
But I mean,
great.
that's a thing that's weird. It's like here it feels like you can't really talk about this kind of stuff. And especially like after the last debate, everyone wants to talk about this stuff, but there's a bit of like a weird taboo around it. Whereas in the Philippines, they're very open about it. They don't really see politics as something that impacts their life. And I think that's probably a big reason why a lot of these like deeply rooted Asian things, deeply rooted Western things can coexist in this way. to them is just kind of like it's always been that way.
Yeah, you do you, we'll do us kind of thing. But with the political thing, it's kind of interesting because like I always find that anytime I end up in a political conversation, it's not even about its discomfort for me. It's about I always wind up having conversations with people who think just like I do.
Yeah,
So it's almost it always becomes a pointless conversation. It's like a preaching to the choir situation where you're like,
yeah.
wait, why are we talking about this? Because we see the world the same. So like, let's just talk about something that, even though we're on the same side, is still yet like divisive, and it just like frustration sort of inspiring, I guess, because you inherently just see the people who don't treat it like a conversation. They treat it like an argument or some sort of
Yeah, I mean,
contention.
it's inherently a fiery subject, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the big things I took away from the Philippines, where it's like you don't necessarily need it to be a fiery subject. And
Well,
also, like I did a lot of historical, like went to museums, and there's this like a walled city called Intramuros, north of Manila, that was built in like the 1500s.
wow.
And I'm like, man, there's no place like the Philippines that's been colonized over and over and over and over again. It was like the world's uh uh I don't know, like there it almost feels like a lot of Filipino culture should have been stripped out of the Philippines after being colonized for so long. And
Hmm.
then like World War II happened, and then the US still has a base there. So there's a lot of like outside influence, but somehow they held on to that Filipino culture. Like I had balut. I don't know if you know what balut is.
I don't.
It's like it's an embryo that's been a duck embryo that's been fertilized. So it comes in an egg, but it's like started to develop. So when you boil it, then you break it open, you can kind of see like a little baby duck in there. Um, it's like a really traditional Filipino dish, more like a street snack. Um,
Okay, so this isn't like an expensive delicacy.
no, no, I paid like 2 pennies for mine.
Wow.
I got really sick from it. Like food poisoning. I thought it was delicious. So like in the moment I loved it, but the day after I got really, really sick. But like the Philippines managed to hold on to a lot of these traditions that have been around for so long. They didn't let the colonization get rid of any of that stuff.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously, such a steeped culture in family values systems as well. I mean, they're very, very tight knit.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about this podcast is I had no idea we'd be talking about this, which is great. Um, yeah, so it sounds like an epic trip, man. Tell me about Singapore. Were you born there or were you born here?
I was born in Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, no way.
My dad was U.S. Navy, so
Yeah, I was
he
gonna say
he was
military.
stationed in I think it's Kings Bay, Georgia, which is I guess not too far from Jacksonville. But soon after I was born, my mom didn't want to raise me and my brother while my dad was on a ship for like 6 months out of the year. So he left the Navy, went into corporate finance, and that brought him back to Asia, where my mom is from Singapore originally.
I see.
She was working there as a doctor. So we moved back to Singapore and lived there for 7 years when
Amazing.
I was like five. So like 5 to 12, I lived there, and then I moved to China where I met Cullen.
Oh, okay. So you guys met in China.
Yeah, yeah, in Beijing.
Where did, or like, what took you to China then? Your dad's job?
Same thing, yeah. So my dad speaks Mandarin and Cantonese, so especially at the time, I guess that was like .com, like 2000 up until 2012 is when I graduated. So that's like boom time for Asia and especially for China.
Right.
So the real value in people were it was bringing in foreigners that understood American business and how to speak English and all of that, but also could translate that to Chinese and not just language wise, but also like the culture of doing
Culture, yeah.
business in China. Which I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, I can see how that benefits us now, where we do business in China and a lot of our manufacturing comes out of there.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was just kind of like, oh, we're I guess moving to Beijing now. My dad
Right.
was like, yeah. And I think he was working. I think it was Google that brought him to China. I don't really remember exactly which company because he jumped between a bunch of different American, Fortune 500 companies that were trying to expand into Google or into China. But Google, as we all know, is blocked in China. My dad was there. Basically, he was one of the big guys to go into China to pull them out of China.
Wow, interesting. Well, you and Cullen met in middle school, I know, and then you guys obviously, assumingly, went to high school together.
Hmm.
But then you went to two different universities. My only knowledge is you went to the East Coast, he went to the West Coast. Now, was that from China? You went to high school in China still?
Yeah, yeah. So I got to Beijing in seventh grade, and we went from seventh up until 12th grade.
Right.
Both graduated, and then he moved to California, where he's originally from, and then I moved back to the East Coast, to Boston,
Where did you go to school?
Berkeley.
Oh, sweet. Music.
Yeah,
What did you play? Or what's your instrument?
guitar.
Oh, cool. Are you still playing a lot?
Not as much as I want to, but one of my favorite brands is PRS, and they recently put out a new model that's based on the kind of like the Strat style model that they did with John Mayer.
The Silver Sky?
Yeah, so it's kind of like an Indonesian made silver sky, but with a carved top. So it doesn't look like a Strat anymore, even though it has kind of the same general shape. But it looks interesting. I actually went to Guitar Center a few days ago to try to find it, and they said it came out yesterday, so we don't have it yet.
Oh, wow. So what's sort of the sound quality that is varied from John's guitar?
Yeah. So the Silver Sky is based on the black one, which is John's original, kind of like the original guitar that made it as like a legendary guitar from his
Yeah.
collection, made by Fender. And so when he started working with PRS, he wanted to try to capture and emulate that feel and that sound. So they used true single coils. On this one, it's called the NF3, I believe. It's technically humbuckers, but they're humbuckers made in the style of single coils. I don't know exactly what that means, but if you look at a picture, you can tell that it's a double rail on each of the three pickups. So that's kind of why I want to try it out. I've never seen or heard anything like that before.
So what do you anticipate the sound being like? How is it different? Like, is it like a higher pitch? Does it have more like drone to it? Like, what it like?
Um, so there's a sound that strats, and generally speaking, single coil guitar, so like a Strat or a Tele, they have this like twang to the tone,
Okay.
where it sounds kind of like light and poppy.
Okay.
Whereas you listen to like an Aerosmith or like a Guns N' Roses, they use primarily Gibson Les Paul
Gibson.
type
Yeah.
guitars, which use usually two humbuckers, and that has more of a meaty, deeper, heavier sound to it.
Right.
It's really comparing like the Aerosmith Guns N' Roses to the Stevie Ray Vaughan Jimi Hendrix sound.
Yeah. 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 Cool. And so this new model is just like a lesser expensive version.
I actually don't know how much it is.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
look into that. I saw a picture of it. I thought it was beautiful. And it's
That's
under their SE line, which is their affordable line,
I see.
made in Indonesia. So, but I hear really good things about it. I haven't played one. I actually have a vintage PRS that was one of the last handmade ones in 1990, and then they went to automated manufacturing I think in 1991 or end of 90. So I have one of the last handmade PRSs in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that something you got as like a collector's item, or was that just happenstance because of the time that you bought it? Did you buy it new?
No, my uncle on my mom's side, I think actually he's not my uncle, it's my mom's like second cousin,
Okay.
someone in my family, he's also a guitar player. He bought it new, and when I was just getting into guitar, I just fell in love with PRS, and I tried it out and I loved it. So he's like, "I'll give you a good deal on it." So I think my parents got it for me for my like 15th or my 16th birthday or something. It was my second guitar, but probably my most treasured one right now.
That's sick.
Yeah.
So when did you start playing guitar then?
Man, as far back as I remember, uh, like nine, maybe
Wow.
nine, something like that.
What were the band like? What inspired it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, my brother did actually. My brother started playing before I did, and he was just doing acoustic guitar, going for lessons, just something to do outside of school. And I was really into fencing at the time,
Oh, sick.
because of Pirates of the Caribbean. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was badass. Um, and then I saw my brother playing, and I was like, that looks a lot more fun than fencing. So picked it up and just kept on playing.
What music was he into then to pick it up?
He was doing a lot of at the time I picked it up. He was really into Metallica, so he was playing a lot of like the old school
No,
Metallica, like
like nothing else matters.
yeah. Ride the Lightning album. I mean, to be honest, for how old I am, everything pre Black Album is considered old.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, Master of Puppets is one of my all time favorite albums. So as soon as I started learning some Metallica and I got good enough to play Master of Puppets, I went straight into that album. And um, yeah, so it was like Metallica, a lot of Guns N' Roses. I got really into Lamb of God, so I was like, I was really heavy into heavy metal.
Wow.
And then I guess probably when I grew up a little bit, so probably like seventh or eighth grade when I first met Cullen, I started transitioning more into the like John Mayer, Steve Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix type of music.
Now, does Cullen play as well?
Yeah, yeah. So we were actually uh, introduced by a mutual friend because we were kind of the only two guitar players in our grade. It wasn't a big class. I think there was like 150 to 160 people in our class. We were the only two kind of serious guitar players. So first day of school ended. My friend was like, "Hey, I have a guy you should meet." So we went over to his house, knocked on his door, and he comes out wearing a bright purple Megadeth sweater.
Hell yeah.
I was literally like, "Hey man, my name's Wes. I play guitar. I heard you play guitar. You want to jam?" And he's like, "All right, I'll be there in 30 minutes."
That's amazing.
Yeah, and he's still the same way. He's still like monotone. I'm like, "Hey, what?" I literally called him today. I was like, "Hey, what time should I come over?" He's like, "I don't know, 1:30." Still exactly the same.
So, yeah, that's crazy, man. So, have you ever met Kirk Hammett or Slash?
I've not met either one of them. No.
Okay. I was at an event once with Slash. I think he was on the cover of Guitar Hero 3 or something like that. And I went to that launch party. It was at the top of a Best Buy in West LA. And it was like, I don't know, 2008 maybe? 2007?
Were they both there, Kirk Hammett and Slash?
No, just Slash. And because I think he was on the cover. And I could be wrong about the game. But
No, no, you're right. You're right. I remember exactly what you're talking
okay.
about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a long time ago. And I'm not a gamer, never have been. And so I asked to take his photo, and his manager, who was like all but holding his hand, was like, and like Slash turned around and he's just like, "Yeah, man, all right." And his manager's like, "No, man, we got to go." And then he's like, "Sorry, bro, I can't do it." And so he like walked away. And then my wife and I were in Hawaii for our anniversary last month, and Slash was like 3 tables away from me.
Oh, wow.
And but I didn't bother him because he was with his wife and stuff. So I still have yet to shake his hand technically and or take a photo, which I'm not really into anyway. But usually it's just a conversation to say, like, "Hey man, I'm a big fan." But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I
Slash
didn't.
was super influential in my earlier guitar journey. So he's probably one of like 4 or 5 celebrities I would freak out if I saw them on the street.
Yeah, he walked by my table and I was just like, "Holy shit!" I was like, told my wife, I was like, "Oh my god, that's Slash," and she goes, "Who's that?" I was like, "Are you kidding me?" She said the same thing about Kelly Slater when we ran into him at the grocery store. Like she had no idea
You
who
ran
we.
into Kelly Slater in a grocery store.
Yeah, well, welcome to Southern California. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
hey, that's true. That's
That's crazy. Well, so all right, so I know your first watch was like a quartz Tissot.
true. Mhm.
Um, but how you and Cullen got into watches at separate moments. But how did you decide to actually like start your company together?
Well, I would say we got into watches at the same time, just separately.
Yeah, I mean sorry, I mean not separate moments, separate geographies. um,
I think that speaks to, like we're obviously very close as friends, but I think that like even deeper than that, there's something about us individually that just we're naturally drawn to these types of things, right? Like
yeah.
we got into guitar separately, got into watches separately, and now at uh, so like now we graduate college. I moved to LA to work in the industry, and our conversations naturally go back to the things that brought us together, right? So music, guitar, and watches. We're also into like a bunch of other things, right? Like I love to talk about guitars and cars and beer and things like that as well. But watches kept coming up, and we were like, man, this whole like working thing kind of stinks. Like applying for jobs and going to interviews, and then you get a job, and then you have to do what you're told. It's like just, I mean, obviously, no one really likes that, right? No one likes having to answer to anyone. But there was just something about him and I that, like, when we were sitting together, it literally felt like our life was about to end. The thought of like working at a big boy job, it was like a terrible idea for us. So we decided, hey, let's just take a swing. We don't have any real obligations. We don't have any children that we know of, at least. So we figured, let's just design a watch, uh, see what it takes to get it made, launch it, and we'll do all this in the span of the next, 6 to 8 months. See how it goes, and if we fall flat on our face, we're exactly where we're at right now, and we
Right.
only lost half a year. So, the risk wasn't. I mean, again, with the benefit of hindsight, I probably wouldn't do that again because the risk is high, right? We pulled out all of our life savings that we saved up throughout working in college, and I continued a part time job while we were launching the company.
Where'd you work?
I was just doing SEO, so freelance SEO for small businesses.
How did you get into that? Like, I mean, how did you know how to do that? I guess is a better question.
It was so Berkeley is kind of funny. The way they work is you have a major and you have a principal. So my principal was guitar, and then with that principal, you have to play, for pretty much half your time at school. So for 2 years, you have to be on the same track as like the performance guys and the writing guys, the production guys. And then you also have a major, and the major that I chose was music business and marketing.
Okay.
And with that major, it was uh, being in close proximity to so many schools like BU and Northeastern, Harvard, obviously MIT.
Yeah.
There was a lot of teachers that kind of went around the different schools. And so we got the benefit of working and studying with some Harvard and MIT and BU professors as well, especially if you're doing, the things that they're known for, which is business, marketing.
Right.
Actually, the engineering school at MIT also worked with closely with Berkeley.
Wow.
So that it was through Berkeley that I started learning. And it's weird to say it. It's like it's a music school, but you don't only learn. It's not like you go in at 9 in the morning, you play guitar till 6. Like there's actually like a college part of it too.
That's yeah. No, I mean, I would anticipate so. Same thing with like Full Sail in Florida. It's like engineering, but I think you like learn other stuff as well.
I think they shut down. I heard they shut down.
Did they? Okay. Well, I'm going back 20 years with that knowledge. So,
uh, so yeah, we literally designed a watch and then booked flights to Hong Kong, where they have this show, but it's like a trade, like it's not even a trade show. It's literally just for watch brands to go find vendors or manufacturers, but not necessarily factories. That's kind of what makes it a bit weird. Like factories don't actually go there; just OEMs go there, and then they kind of like contract out your work from there.
I see.
Yeah, so we did there. Literally knocked on doors. Then we went across the water to mainland to Shenzhen, where the factories actually are. Again, knocked on a bunch of doors, visited factories, and somehow convinced one factory to work with us.
Okay, so take me through this because I think it's probably fairly similar to fashion in certain regards. Because if you're an OEM, you're talking about like a Miyota or somebody like that would be at that show.
Yeah, I actually don't know if Miyota would be there, but it would be like
But like a movement manufacturer is what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah, you definitely find some there.
Whereas, like when you are trying to become a Miyota, you need the relationship with the factory that's actually making the parts so that you guys can then design the movement and then assemble it wherever you want, be it there or here or otherwise.
Yeah.
So, at what point do you have to deal with a broker? I'm going back when you first started, so call it 2017 or whatever year it
Yeah,
was that you
yeah.
guys started.
So
So, do you deal with a broker who then deals with the movement, who then deals with the manufacturer?
that can happen, but that's not as common. Usually
Okay.
we work with just an OEM, and they're basically like a glorified project manager.
Right.
and then they just contract directly to factories from there.
Okay. So the factories don't actually employ people to act as that person, that liaison?
Some do, some
Okay.
do.
So it's like Alibaba.
Yeah, yeah, in a way, in a way. But what I would say is that if you want the good, like the top of the line factories, they don't
Yeah.
have a sales team. They don't have any project managers because they don't actually want nor need new business.
Okay.
They're already kind of under exclusive contracts with, Omegas and tags and all those like big brands. So they don't need, like, even if they found us, we'd be a small fry for them.
But do you work with those types of factories that do work for
We
those?
do now. Now we do now.
So how do you get that foot in the door?
Well, so the way it started was through just an OEM, right? The way pretty much all brands start. And then from there, we started to realize something we actually jumped between a couple, three different OEMs. And we started to realize that whenever we wanted to do something a little bit more innovative, we always got pushback. We understand now why that is because we are our own OEM now. So we kind of understand why we can't really do new innovative things as an OEM purely. And
Right.
is because you don't really make any margin. You take a big risk in trying something new, and if it doesn't work, you lose the money on the tooling, you lose the money on the materials, you lose obviously the time value. So it's not in an OEM's best interest to innovate and do new stuff.
Yeah, because it disrupts production.
Yeah, yeah, and especially if it doesn't work, then they're at a loss.
They're pissed.
Most of the time, the contract is, "I'm going to pay you this money to give us a final watch," and if an OEM says, "Yeah, okay," even if that watch has something new that they haven't tried before, they still have to deliver that watch, even if something on it doesn't work right.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, they have to restart. And so it's not a good idea as an OEM to do new stuff.
What was the thing that you asked for initially that they were like, no, we're not going to do that?
What was it? I think it was actually our clasp. I think it was Nodex.
Oh, and the bracelet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We wanted to have a extension clasp, but like a very specific type of extension, right? We wanted it to be modular so that we could change the enclosure design, or we could license this out very, very quickly and easily. And no one really wanted to try it out until we started finding the right people and hit the right numbers and the right scale, the right volume, and all that kind of stuff. Years down the line, like we started talking about it back in 2018, our second year in business, but we couldn't actually start it until 2021.
To actually make it.
Yeah,
So what is that adjustment or what is that like sort of extension?
it's just this. I mean, you're on camera. I'm not sure if this podcast is going to be on camera, but
No, 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 it's not. So it's almost kind of like a almost like a T-fit.
kind of, but that's kind of milled into the enclosure. So the idea here is that so this is the button right here, right? So it
Right.
goes in and out. The idea is that you can take this entire module out and you can put it into any old clasp. So
Oh, no way.
if if Mark II wants to have an extension clasp, but he doesn't want to have a Nodus design or a Nodus branded enclosure, he'll just buy the little module and he'll plug it into his own clasp design.
So did you guys engineer that and come up with that yourself?
Yeah.
That almost sounds like a business in and of itself.
Yeah, it is a business into itself.
Oh shit, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. That's really great. How hard was that to do? Like when you think of something like that, and I'm assuming, do you have a patent on that?
We don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can get into why if that's something you think our listeners would be interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to know. I know it's expensive as hell to file for one.
Yeah, so actually what I found out was that filing for one is not that expensive.
It's upholding it is what's expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Relatively, right? I think it's probably around 10 to 15K to actually patent it. But the real cost comes when someone infringes on it.
Yeah,
Then you're talking about litigation, and now we're talking 30, 40, $50,000.
right.
Our reasoning was, and we spent a long time going back and forth on this, pretty much throughout the entire design process and the engineering and the production process. So over like the course of 18 to 24 months, we were talking about this, and we decided to not patent it because the whole point of of doing it this way was that it was supposed to be easy to share and easy to license to brands. So what we figured is, instead of patenting this, why don't we just make it so easy to
Goodbye.
get this
Yeah.
from like anyone can literally just email us. Well, not anyone, any brand can just email us and say, hey, I'm interested in licensing the Nodex module, and we'll do it at cost. I mean, essentially cost. There's some admin fee, but it's like $1 per clasp or something like that. And just make it super super easy for brands to come in and use it in their products.
So, what is the licensing like? Like, how do you license it? Like literally, how? Like, walk us through. Like, if I wanted to license it, what do we do?
Yeah, so basically you'll email me and then you'll show me what the actual integration is going to look like, right? So we would need to know what the clasp enclosure looks like as well as what the bracelet looks like so that we can either manufacture an adapter link, which is what we've done before in the past, but we've also sent drawings to the factories that make for other brands and say, okay, so this is how you want to make this adapter link and this side of the bracelet so that it feels smooth and it fits properly.
Cool.
Yeah, we've done it so many different ways. We've made the entire thing and sold that to brands. We've also just sent drawings. So it just depends on the brand.
Oh, that's great. That's really cool. Where did your brand name come from? Where does Nodus come from?
It's funny, over the years I've started to forget because I actually had an answer like in the early days and I thought it was a good answer and now I don't remember. But I think it was like in a book or something. I saw the word in a book, and then when I looked it up, I it's a Latin word. Um, it means node, Node, and I thought it was pretty emblematic of who Cullen and I are as people. We've always been driven by our passions, but we've always had quite a lot of passions,
Hmm.
and we've always strived to become, not masters of our craft, but really really good at what we do. Like I started playing guitar and I never stopped. um it's one of those things that like we're just very obsessive people,
Yeah,
but we still have a lot of interest, so it's not like we're not just hobbyist on the side.
a surface level. Yeah.
Yeah, everything we get into, we like try to become experts, at the very least become experts in whatever it is that we're doing. um and so the idea of a node kind of was inspiring to us. It felt like it, again, like I felt like it was emblematic of who we were as people. And then when we start talking about what we want the brand to be and what we want it to become, it was also kind of emblematic of that.
Hmm.
So like as people, we're like a bunch of hobbies and passions smashed into one. But as a brand, what we want to do is kind of be the intersection of this entire micro brand, independently owned space, right? So we're like Nodex is one example of something that we're doing that we think is going to raise the entire tide for micro brands. Intersect is another thing that we're doing that I think is very community focused. So that, and again, these things didn't exist when we started, but it was definitely what we wanted it to become eventually.
And so Nodex is like the clasp
Yeah,
module.
Nodex is the clasp module, and then Intersect is a kind of like a watch party.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, we'll get to that for sure. Um, so back in 2017, my understanding is you launched with one watch
Mhm.
and dumped all your money into it. Do you mind me asking what that cost to do that production?
Yeah, it was, uh, man, a long time ago. I think it was around 40K, 35, 40K, something like that.
And you were pleased with the result, or you were just like, okay, we got to move these things?
We were not pleased with it.
Okay.
So we made 500. I think we sold only 200 of them. The
Okay.
rest of them just we couldn't pass it through our QC. So um,
Wow.
yeah, so I actually when I moved here, I had a bunch of these old like cases and crystals and bracelets that were, I mean, now I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I can tell that it's shit. And it was like it was a weird moment because I moved into this house 2 years ago and I threw all of that old stuff away.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like part of me was holding on to it for a long time, hoping that maybe one day we can fix it, and like 10-year anniversary we can sell these things so that we kind of recapture some of the lost money out of that 40K that we put in. But
I was gonna say you should have held it for the Nodus museum that you're building in 10 years.
I still have a couple. I still have a
Okay.
couple. Yeah, yeah.
Look at what crap watches can be, and then like we'll look at what we're doing now. But like honestly, it's with your margin built into that production, obviously, having sold 200, not quite half.
Mhm.
Did you make any money then, or were you out because this was like your first run? Okay, wow.
Honestly, we didn't really make money until quite recently. Like I think 2021 is probably the first year that we were profitable.
As a company.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you start taking a salary then?
2018, but it was like I think I made like 12K in 2018,
Okay, wow. Okay.
which I mean, as you know, in LA, you're basically on the street, right?
Yeah, I mean, so were you still working part-time then as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was working part-time up until yeah, pretty much up until 2018.
Okay, gotcha.
And then 2019, we started paying ourselves a little more, but still, not
Right.
nearly as much as we need to survive.
Yeah.
So, no eating out, no drinking on Fridays, cooking at home, cooking a lot of like cheap stuff,
Yeah.
just doing anything we can to keep the thing going.
Ramen.
Um, and then obviously 2020 was a big year for the entire world, but especially for companies that were kind of born digitally native already.
Mm-hmm.
We like pretty much every other e-commerce brand in the world exploded in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
continued 2021. I think 2022 got a little weird for a lot of brands. Also 23 and this year, I'm hearing that it's been a little weird for especially for watch companies.
Yeah.
We've been doubling for about 3 years now since 21.
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah.
So you did 500 that first run. Like, what is a typical production now?
Well, we just went into production actually 2 days ago. I think it was 1,800 watches.
And that's per style.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool. So how do you know like when to introduce a new style then?
Um,
As opposed to reordering something that's been successful.
well, it's kind of a balancing act, right? Like for example, the thing that we just placed an order for was a revamp of the Sector series. It's basically a new Sector series, but
Yeah.
still like keeping the same spec, same movement, and still have the field dive. Like kind of like the idea is still the same, but we have a new case for it that's a lot thinner, and some minor tweaks here and there. So I'm actually wearing it right now. It very much feels like a new watch, but it's still like you can tell this is just a new
Version.
generation of a of a
Yeah.
of a older design. I think the last new, like completely new model that we put out was the Unity 2 years ago, and it's usually guided by the market, but just based on what people tell us, whatever they want. But something that I'm starting to notice now, though, is that we're getting a lot fewer requests for things like, oh, make a 36 millimeter, make a chronograph, make a this, make a that. I think people are asking less of that from us, uh, asking more for, well, obviously for restocks, because I think we're sold out of a lot of different models right now. So asking for restocks or asking for old models that haven't been revived or brought back in a long time. So the duality is an example of that, where we launched it in 2019, sold out in a couple months, and people have been asking for it since then. So it's been years since we put that watch out. Um, the Contrail 3 that just came out, the Contrail GMT, that is kind of a similar story. The last generation came out in 2020, and we haven't had it since then. And a lot of people are asking for it. So it's kind of it's a new watch, but it's totally redesigned from the ground up. So it's still made in the style of the old one. It has the old identity, but it's a new platform.
It's so counterintuitive to me that something would sell out and you wouldn't reorder it.
Yeah, yeah, I know it's not a great business strategy. I can tell you that. But I think there's definitely a reason why we're doing it this way.
Okay.
The, every every watch up until now that we put out, uh, it hasn't been perfect. There have been things that we wanted to achieve on the watch that we haven't been able to, either because the tests that we were doing for something fill in the blank, it wasn't ready yet, or uh, something happened in production that made it so that when we actually made the watches at scale, ended up something ended up happening.
Hmm.
I would say the Contrail GMT is the first watch where I don't see it changing from here on out. And then also this new sector series. But like
Yeah.
the Unity is a pretty new model, but we're already redesigning it. And I think it's tough for us to tell when we get the prototypes and we wear it for a bit and we're super happy with it. It's still hard for us to tell how that's going to translate in the real world to our customers, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the small like niggles that people have here and there, we aren't the ones looking for it. We're looking at it as designers and as engineers, not as the actual end user.
Right.
We kind of need that feedback loop before we can perfect the product. Something like the Contrail was out initially in 2018, so it took us 6 years to land at a spot where we're like, all right, we're done. The Sector series came out in 2019, so 5 years for us to land in a spot where we figured, all right, now we're done. you know
Yeah. No, no, I can identify with that wholeheartedly. The sector has really great depth to that dial. I don't recall seeing the precursor to these in the sector series. So, what changes were made?
the one that's live right now is actually the same one that's been around since
Oh,
2019,
oh, I
with
see.
like very minor changes. Like the position of the lug holes changed a little bit,
Oh, okay.
the color of the loom, different dial colors, but the overall architecture stayed the same.
Okay.
So the update that's coming down the line is going to be a pretty big facelift. I think. I mean, I don't want to make any wild claims, but I think it's going to be the thinnest NH35 watch in the world
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
for,
So,
well, considering 150 meters.
right. Okay. Okay. Cool,
Yeah.
cool. Um, what is, have you ever had to change manufacturers of any parts, like in the middle of production and or
hmm
can you talk a little bit about what that process is like? Because I'm sure not only does it contribute to delays in development and bringing to market, but like how do you go about changing? Because like obviously when you sign up to do business with one person, I'm assuming they bring you to a certain level when you decide this isn't for us, we need to make a change. So like do you get your money back? Are those parts scrapped? Do you hang on to those parts? Like walk us through like what that's like.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, we are our own OEM. Um, but that in itself has an origin story that I think in some ways is even more interesting than Nodus.
Cool.
But essentially, what happened was in 2018, the third OEM that we worked with, third and final one that we ever worked with, they actually went bankrupt mid project, and they were closing up shop and everything. And our representative was some young girl. She didn't actually know a lot about watches, and she probably broke the rules by doing this. But essentially, we said to her, "Look, I get that you'll give us our refund for what we paid or our deposit, but the issue here isn't the money. The issue here is that we have momentum and we need to put out a new watch because we have nothing to sell.
Right.
Even if we get the money back, we have to go find a new OEM. You already made all the parts, right? I mean, I think probably they didn't make the dials, which is the easiest part to make, but they made everything else. So we're just like, what are you going to do? You're going to throw this stuff away, melt it down, and use it again? Why don't we just pay you the rest of it?" But like their bank accounts were shuttered and like they couldn't operate anymore. So
So here's a shipping label and just ship me all my stuff.
yeah. So instead, what she did was she said to us, "Why don't I just introduce you to the guy that owns the factory and like the guy that everyone goes to, right? The guy behind the guy."
Wow.
And so we got his contact information and we went to meet up with him. And what he really liked was that we already had a very innovative mindset to our business. We were already trying to push the envelope a little bit more than even a lot of big companies, and he really liked that. he's an engineer through and through. So engineers tend to like that kind of thing, right?
So what ways are you doing that?
Well, so Nodex was one of the big things
I see. Okay.
we're working on. But another thing that I noticed was that when we were making a new model, I think at the time it was the Avalon that we're working on. He was asking us if he could experiment with materials, if he could try different bezel mechanisms, if he could do, a lot of things that even we didn't think of. So he liked that freedom that we gave him that other larger companies were not giving him.
Right.
This is the model, these are the materials, and this is how we're going to make it. Go make it.
So he wanted to do cool shit basically, and he didn't want to just take direction all day,
Yeah, exactly.
which is kind of like working for the man. Although that's the joke, right? Is starting your own business as an entrepreneur. You don't have a boss, but everyone's your boss because
Yeah.
they're your customer.
Yep. Yep. But at the very least, you get to find your own path.
Sure.
The customer wants that end result. You still have to deliver that end result, but you could kind of take a left here and a right there and go back a little bit, and you can
Yeah.
find your way to that end result. And this guy really liked that, so we found, well, we got the parts to start. I think that he probably saved us in that moment, and then as a result, we are like, why don't we just continue trying this out? Why don't I know that like he's not a project manager, so he doesn't have the experience running projects. He's an engineer. So we had to work together, and actually up until like very recently, we were still wiring money to one of his friends' businesses whenever we put our contracts in. I mean, I say recently, it's like 2020 when he actually incorporated his own entity, got his own office and his own team and everything. But yeah, we're basically sister companies now. So there's an entity in China and a separate entity here in LA that acts as an OEM to Nodus and a bunch of friends and stuff. And so with with that relationship, he just really enjoyed the freedom that we were giving him. Uh, we actually took his opinion on design things as well, colors, different orientation of different random shapes, and like he wasn't scared of giving his opinion anymore at that point.
Wow. Now, forgive me though, but was he the guy who was the head of the business that was going bankrupt?
No, 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 no.
Okay, that's not. He was deeper than that, you said.
Yeah, so like I said, the OEM actually contracts out work. An
Right.
OEM very rarely has their own machines, their own polishers. They don't actually do any like physical work. It's just a bunch of
Interesting.
office workers, and they contract out to the factories. So this guy ran factories. That's his background.
Gotcha. You mentioned that you guys have this kind of relationship with other friends that also use those. Are you able to share who some of those friends are or no?
I think I could probably share a couple. I could tell you that Raven, he definitely started as a inspiration to start Nodus. He's like one of the OG brands. Um, but like when we first met, he kind of took us under his wing and said, these are the things you should do. Don't do this. Figure out how to do that this way. So he
Wow.
gave us a lot of really good input from. At the time he was doing it for 10 years already, and
That's great.
he helped us out a lot. And I don't see it as like, and this is why I want to be very careful when I talk about it publicly, is because from the public point of view, I think it's very easy for them to see one of our clients and say, "Oh, it's a XYZ brand made by Nodus," and is not at all that. It's definitely more like a team effort. We just happen to find the right factories, right? It would, and these factories already make for all the big brands.
I totally understand. Like if somebody came to me and said like I'm looking to do this, as long as I can identify that you're not directly competing with me, like I can give you some information. But otherwise just contract me to make it for you and I'll do that, you know. But that's cool. No, I like that. I mean, that's really nice. Um, do you do assembly and QC in LA still?
Mhm.
Oh, that's great. So how big's the team now at Nodus?
Uh, for Notice, well, so we have two fulfillment in Seattle, me, Colin, and Rain here in LA, and then Jake in New York. So six.
Oh, wow. So, well, who's doing what then? Because that's really spread out.
Uh, so Rain and Colin do the watch stuff, so QC assembly, um,
Wow.
warranty, repairs, things like that.
Oh, wow.
Seattle does fulfillment, and then New York does marketing, press, photos, media, and then I just kind of walk around and look at shit.
Okay, so Seattle you ship to once it's all done and put together and stuff. So I guess you ship it there. Does Seattle also package everything? Are you
Yep.
okay? So you're shipping the watches in, like, for the lack of a better description, a coffin, and then they handle kind of how the customer experiences the opening.
Yeah,
Um,
like little styrofoam trays, just slot the
yeah.
watches in, and then they do final checks. So they do pressure testing, they do fitting the bracelet, time graphing, any corrective work that has to be done. Um, that's all done in Seattle.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. And then New York, you just ship one or two watches to be photographed and
One of each, yeah, and
okay.
then we'll do the media. But he also does our marketing and press. So like all the reviews you see online on YouTube or any of the magazines, those watches came from Jake in Buffalo.
Okay. So is Jake full time with you, or does he do this for multiple people?
Um, he's not full time; he's part time, but he does do it for multiple people.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Many of
Yeah.
our friends and brands that we work with.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great. Good for him. Um, how do you set your pricing? Is it the standard markup like with every model, or is it contingent on production numbers or
Yeah, yeah, it just depends on production. If production cost is astronomical, then we have to charge a little more.
okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry. We take our costs and multiply it by whatever we need to.
Okay. So are you motivated by like a profit percentage? So you just make sure you're hitting that with each model, or is there actual different profitability based on model?
It I wouldn't say it's different profitability based on model. It's different profitability based on timing because like if we have a really expensive R&D project, then we don't up the prices of our watches just because of that. We keep
Right.
it consistent, stack as much as we can, and then we'll invest from our war chest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Profitability is pretty much the same across the line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what like motivates you to stay within this price point that you guys exist in? Like, is there any drive to participate in like a $5,000 watch or a $200 watch?
Uh, the simple answer is that I personally like if Nodus didn't exist and I was just, sitting here as a watch enthusiast, I'd say 9 out of the 10 watches I want would probably live in the 500 to call it $1,000 range.
Really?
Because that's what I'm interested in, that I think makes sense that that's what we should kind of play. Like that's the arena we should kind of play in.
Sure.
Uh, that's not to say like we do make watches that go for several $1,000s, just not under Notice.
Okay.
I Like I said, I really like the arena that we're playing in. I think
Yeah.
the under $1,000 range is the most exciting uh, price point in the watch industry. Anything over that gets a little bit stale to me.
Why is that?
Why is that? Everyone plays it safe. It's too safe above, say like 1,500 and up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Safe in with regards to like design and innovation, or safe as in
Yeah, all the above.
yeah. Yeah.
All the above. Yeah, I think it's like especially for independent brands, but even like Tudor is guilty of this too. Like if you look up the word dive watch in a dictionary, the Tudor Black Bay is probably going to show up.
Sure.
To me, that feels safe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
There are
yeah,
no
yeah.
cool colors being used. Um, Now, I do want to caveat. I think that there's some exceptions, right? Like Ferrer is a good example of a brand that plays in a higher price range, and I would buy a Fairlander. In fact, I think I'm probably going to buy a Fairlander soon.
Cool.
But it's because yes, they're at that price range, but they're doing something that's actually special that
Hmm.
can only exist under Fair.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
Formex is another example of that. They play in the $2,000 range, but
That carbon watch is so sick.
yeah, yeah. So they're doing something very special, and I would, pay good money for Formex.
Yeah.
With very few exceptions, I think I'd probably fall asleep looking at most watches above $1,000.
That's really funny. How do you balance? business with the product? Meaning, like, how do you balance the desire to like make a product a certain thing
Mhm.
with still making profit, for example, like without being like, oh my god, well, this is what I want, but as X, but Y would actually make the company more money.
Mm. It got easier over time. I think the longer we've been in business, the more clearly I see that it all business is about incentives, right? Like you want to align incentives either with your suppliers or in this case, when it comes to product pricing, consumers don't see it yet like quite as clearly, but they are actually incentivized to pay a little bit more for a product coming from Nodus. I wouldn't say they should pay, again, 1,000 plus for a Nodus because I don't think it's worth that. But
Interesting.
if they compare one of our say like a Sector series, right? Like the Sector Deep, it's a watch that has a NH35 500-meter water resistance, and we sell it for 599 $600, right? You could get a watch like that that's similarly spec'd for 250 bucks. I don't think you can compare the two watches, but if you're looking at just a piece of paper with the specs written down, you could have, you know, brand X and then you can have the Sector Deep. And for us, I started to realize as time went on that that profit margin that we have to stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a part of it is because we have a team we have to pay. We obviously have to pay for our own living as well. But the extra money that's made, we don't know exactly what it's going to go into at the moment that we sell that watch, but we know that at some point we're going to need that. We're going to need those funds to go into something like a Nodex or like a, like we're working on a new bezel mechanism right now. And these things cost a lot of money. So if we want to make a better product, we can't just sell a $250 Sector Deep. We
Right.
could probably sell it and make a ton of them and make a pretty decent living, but that's not really like we're not trying to just become multimillionaires selling thousands and thousands of cheap watches. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that would be the easy thing to do. But to actually like change the way watches are made and change the way people uh, interpret micro brands and independent brands, especially in our space, that takes a little bit more work and a little bit more time. And I think that that profit margin is there to enable to keep that door open and enable us to go down that path.
Is there anything dressy that Notice would make? Because it's very sporty, the brand.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we actually tried to design a dress watch and it turned into the Sector GMT. So I think
Okay.
yeah, we're not really dress watch people. We're not very fancy. Like we wear t-shirt and jeans most days. So it's
Yeah.
like because we can't find a good setting to wear a dress watch, it's hard for us to actually design a dress watch.
Okay. I see. That makes sense. Um,
I love the idea of making one. I can't say we've ever made one before, but yeah, the idea of making a dress watch is fun. I probably wouldn't ever wear it, but it'd be fun.
right. Okay. Well, food for thought.
Yeah.
Um, you're into cars. I know you are. What was your first car?
Uh, I actually didn't start driving until I came to LA. So, uh, because I was like in big cities, so subway and MRT and all that stuff, public transport. But my first car here was an Infiniti Q50, which I didn't like at all, but
Okay.
got a really really good deal on it, which is why I got it. But right now, I mean, you know what I drive right now? I drive a 2019 GLI, which I think is the best. Especially, I don't know if you saw the latest generation that they just unveiled last week. It looks horrendous.
Yeah.
I was going to text you about it, but I'm like, he's probably going to ask me about it on the podcast.
I actually didn't. I'm out of the GLI loop, but I had the Mark IV
Oh, sweet.
GLI, which honestly, my understanding has gained quite the following and value. Mine was mine was amazing. It was like that dark gray. I don't even remember what color gray they called it. But those BBS wheels with that single tailpipe. It was
Hmm.
manual, of course. The Recaro seats. It was sick. It was
Yeah.
a 2004 and a half. I think it was technically a half year model. Unbelievable car. It's what I moved to California in, actually, from North Carolina.
So one just sold for, oh no, this was a while ago. Last year one sold for 7K.
Oh, that's not much.
Yeah, I mean it's sexy though.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be worth something one day if people, obviously maintain them. But mine's been long gone. Um,
And then recently I actually picked up a Tesla Model 3.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
I mean, no, I know what you mean. Um, but I start to drive it around as my daily.
Sure,
I actually we have so me and my girlfriend we each have a car, and the Tesla is more hers than it is mine, anyways.
I see.
But I do drive it, and I do like. I think it's a lot of fun, but it's kind of the same stuff that everyone says about EVs in general, which is that they're just really big toaster ovens on wheels with
Yeah,
an iPad in there. It doesn't have a soul, but it'll get you from A to B fine. And I think that
sure.
being in California, gas prices are insane, so it's kind of the practical choice that isn't really a terrible experience.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Um, are you? I'm assuming you're in like an office or something in your house.
Yeah, yeah. This second bedroom, which is an office now.
Is your door back there Nardo gray?
Yeah,
That's sick. Yeah, I mean it literally looks like the same gray that I use in my logo, in fact. When I do the stealth stuff, it's like cool gray 9 is the color code.
yeah. It's quite close. This is a little bit lighter than that, but or
Okay.
sorry, it's a little bit darker than that, but it is very close.
Yeah, that's sick. Well, let's talk real estate because I know that's something of interest to you.
Hmm.
Um, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not trying to air your laundry, you own a rental property, but you rent where you're living currently. Is that right?
No, I own this house that I'm
Oh, you did? Okay, okay. When did you get this house?
pick this one up 2021, end of 21. But it was a pretty long renovation. I basically gutted the whole thing because this house was built in 1929. And I
Wow.
believe it was renovated once in like the late 30s, and it hasn't been touched since then. So all the piping was still like
Proper.
the steel. It was the old knob and tube wiring. No, so like just I had to change out the aluminum wiring as well, upgrade the panel, obviously repaint everything, retexture all the walls, change the flooring, actually like change the entire kitchen layout as well. It was a big project.
Wow. Yeah, after having gutted my house, I was like, I wonder if it would have been smarter to just level the house and
Yeah.
just start anew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really funny. So what's the motivation? Is it passive income retirement strategy? Like what's the real estate game?
Um, so I actually was talking to Colin about this because I'm in a construction project right now.
Okay.
So this plot of land, it's a typical North Long Beach plot of land where you have quite a lot of space on your property, but you have one little house that's a square at the front half of it. So the back has a bunch of fruit trees and a whole lot of space. Um, and obviously there's a huge housing shortage here in, well, actually in the entire world,
Yeah.
especially in this country, especially in this state, especially in this county. Um, so to me, part of it is adding to the housing supply, giving a good quality rental makes me feel good. Obviously, it'll put some money in my pocket, so I'll be able to maybe spin it off into another project somewhere else in the neighborhood or something like that. But what I was telling Cullen was that in a weird way, I was looking at the tech drawings for the like the floor plan and the builder's plan for the ADU that I'm building in the back, and it's actually kind of scratching the same itch as looking at a watch tech drawing,
Sure.
um, with obviously with different considerations, right? Like you look at a watch drawing and you have to consider how's it going to wear on the wrist, how is the crystal going to refract the light, things like how's it just generally how's it going to translate into real life, and it's a very similar thing with a house.
Totally.
Okay, this layout makes sense, but the plumbing will have to loop through there, and then if we put the washer dryer there and you're sitting in the living room right next to it, is it going to bother you? So it's kind of like very similar where you see it on paper and it looks good, but you have to actually like see it in real life. I think actually it's a little bit harder with property because you can't just 3D print something for a couple pennies like we do with our watches.
Yeah, and there's also like building codes and standards that like,
Yeah,
the only thing you're fighting in watches is literally space and then maybe physics. Yeah.
yeah.
You don't have like any governing bodies to tell you you can't do that. But you're like, well, the case is a 46 millimeter case. The
Yeah,
movement's 38 millimeter. There's plenty of space. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, but I think it goes back to sort of what I was saying about me and Cullen as well. Just as people where we like to do things, we like to like it's not enough for us to sit in front of a computer and like plug away at spreadsheets. We
yeah.
like real world things. And you don't get much more real world than real estate. So to me, it's just kind of scratching the same itch that I've been trying to scratch since I started playing guitar, just in a
Yeah.
very different way.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, dude, we need to talk about Intersect because this episode is going to drop right before the show.
Cool.
Um, go.
Sure. So I think I want to start by saying what makes Intersect different because I think to a lot of people it's just a watch show, and I think so far it has been mostly just a watch show. But the idea is that it's it's planned by the brands, it's supported by the brands, it's paid for by the brands. There's no kind of third party in between the brands and the venue and the brands and the attendees, and that's by design. I think long term, one of the things that we see with Intersect is we want it to evolve with the needs of the brands. So if one day the brands come to us and say, "Hey, this show format's not working anymore. We want to have more like a keynote type of structure," we could make that decision like that and just run with it
Right.
because we're already friends with all these brands and we're already working with many of these brands. The feedback loop is instantaneous. Like we're talking to probably 6 or 7 brands on a daily basis. So we have that feedback loop in like constant rotation. So for us, it's like having control of our own platform, like Intersect, gives us the ability to pivot and make blink decisions and do whatever these brands and partners are asking us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then bigger than that, I think also the type of press that we want to bring into these shows also is um, with other shows we don't really have a choice because with other shows the motivation or I guess the sign of success for other shows is how many people did we get in the door, right? We just want as many eyeballs to come in the door as possible. We're actually the opposite. We want fewer people. Part of it is because it's actually a lot cheaper for us to run the show if fewer people come, but also it's actually not it's not even about the number of people, it's the type of people that are coming. We want them to be already captive, they're already listening to what these brands have to say, they're kind of already in the community, in the ecosystem. So for them it's not about coming to the booth and saying to Astor and Banks, tell me about your brand. It's more
Yeah.
about them going to Astor and Banks and saying, hey, I love the Fortitude, but I want to see that dial color in person. So that's kind of what we're trying to create, something a little bit more intimate that can evolve really rapidly based on the feedback from brands and attendees.
Well, with fewer people and with the percentage game being, I guess, maybe the motivator for the alternative kind of case of maximizing eyeballs, I guess. You're basically selling advertising at that point, right? Like
Mhm.
just trying to maximize the number of eyeballs for X price or what have you.
Yeah, yeah.
But with what's the qualifying like? Because at the end of the day, these brands obviously want to sell stuff, right? So what I find is, and this isn't me pushing back, this is me genuinely asking because I don't know. What I find is if you do the same show over and over and over, you're going to start seeing the same people, and they may not be shopping the same way as if, from the first time
Mhm.
of exhibiting in front of these people. That's the motivation for changing geography, obviously,
Yeah.
which I completely understand and agree with, all that stuff. But how do you ensure that you're going to be successful every event? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think there's really a good way to ensure that it's going to be a successful event because every brand is measuring on different metrics anyways.
Okay,
So like what might be successful to me might not be successful to, Fair or something. So,
I see.
but we do have some guidelines that we follow for brands to qualify. So for any new brands, they need to have some kind of tangible success rate, like something that shows that they're not just gonna drop off the face of the earth in a
Right.
couple of years.
Yeah.
We want them to be a brand that is kind of primed for success. Even I mean, it could still be a new brand. It could still be a small brand.
Sure.
They need to have something special about them that gives them a reason to exist. Then we'll bring them in and help them tell their story.
Hmm.
Um, and then for returning brands, they need to have something new because if a brand came last year and they haven't released anything new, they just did a bunch of restocks or maybe a new dial color. That's not really enough to justify them coming again and showing the pretty much the exact same stuff to the exact same people.
So is that your investigation that you're doing on your part to see like what these brands are doing on their ends rather than just saying, "Hey, we like you guys and you're friends of ours, so you're inherently invited."
Yeah, I mean there's that as well. Like a lot of our friends, luckily, are running brands that are actually evolving, are
Yeah.
actually putting new stuff out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we haven't had to have that hard conversation yet. But also, I think it's worth mentioning that I'm not kind of the judge, jury, executioner here. We actually put
Sure.
a board in place that consists of Peter from Jack Mason and Marcus from Formex, and then me and Cullen. So
Cool.
four of us get together and we have these conversations about, oh, is this brand good enough? Is that brand good enough? Can we invite that brand? And if any of us have a disagreement, we literally email all the brands that are signed on for that show that we're talking that's in question, and we say, hey, here's a questionnaire. Vote for 2 out of the 5 brands on this list, and we'll just let the brands decide.
Cool. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
It's very
Um,
easy to run a democracy when you're talking to like 12 people.
right, right. Yeah. All right, so what do the listeners need to know that we haven't talked about, especially with regards to Intersect that will be quote unquote, I think this weekend if you're listening.
Yeah. Well, definitely if you're in San Diego all the way up to LA or even as far north as Ventura, the show happens in downtown Long Beach. It's kind of like the center of everything. And it's also a little bit safer than like downtown LA, not as crowded and touristy as Santa Monica. We've done this show since 2021 and we've done it in all these different spots and we found that Long Beach works the best. Um,
Cool.
it's not just because I live down the road. That is definitely a big plus, um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if you spent any time in Long Beach, but it's definitely one of my favorite cities. It's chill, but there's a lot to do. Good food, good drink, right by the water.
Yep.
So we wanted it to be, especially because a lot of the brands are going to be flying in from all over the world. We wanted it to be in a place where they can get the SoCal experience, but not have to go to like Venice and like the weird parts of LA to do that.
Right.
Downtown Long Beach at a so it's a brewery called Alter Society, but upstairs is an event space called Alter, and it's this giant. It's the oldest building in Long Beach, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh wow.
The venue itself is very cool, and honestly, the venue itself is worth seeing. Great pizza, great beer.
Say less. Man, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. And obviously, if people are listening to this, if you haven't caught on, I will be there exhibiting as well. So please come. What are the hours?
So VIP starts at 10 in the morning to 12. That is ticketed, but that basically gives you a chance to come in and have a bit more of a private, quieter conversation with the brand owners. We're also providing coffee and pastries, and that's included with the ticket price.
Sure.
Also included with that is open bar at when the general population opens at 12.
Sweet.
Goes from noon to 4.
And how much does that cost for VIP?
I think it's 40.
Okay, cool. And then general admission is free.
Yeah, yeah. General admission is free. Yeah, 40 for VIP. And if you only want to do open bar, that'll be 25 online or 30 at the door. And that's just open bar.
Cool.
All the beer that they're going to be serving is actually brewed like right downstairs. So
And then the show ends at what time?
4.
4. Sweet. Okay. Amazing, man. Can't wait. Yeah, I think it's going to be super fun. I mean, obviously, I went as an attendee, not as a vendor before, and it is cool. It's exactly what you said. It's small, it's close knit. You do get that sort of one-on-one attention type of feeling
Yeah.
with the brands, which is really, really nice. I mean, granted, there might be 4 people standing around you, but you didn't have to fight through 70 to get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's cool. Wes, thanks, man.
But yeah, thanks for this, man. This was fun.
Yeah, no, it's great. And obviously we'll have to have you back on as things continue to develop there with everything you got cooking. Would love to hear more about this ADU, which maybe I'll hear about on that Saturday.
Yeah. Maybe you can pop up like the day before or after the show or something. See my house. See what I've done with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
I'll see you soon.
Bye.
This wraps up this episode of the Standard Age podcast. If you like what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.